What's up? What's up? What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Leveled Up Life podcast. Branamier Courtney, as always, here with my main man, Paul McClain.
Let's go, bro.
Helping people level up their life in all the areas that matter most: faith, family, fitness, finance, franchise. Just a quick question for you, bro. If you could think back 1 year from now, 1 year, what were you doing? You remember?
1 year from now, dude?
1 year from now.
February
what were you doing,
of 2024.
Yeah.
Bro, I got no clue.
You remember what you had for breakfast?
I got no idea what I was doing, bro.
1 year from now, bro. Let me bring you up to speed. It's our very first podcast, dude.
1 year ago?
1 year ago. It popped up on my feed yesterday.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Well, this is number 51.
I think, dude, it said 1 year, so we must have skipped
I think
a
we
week
skipped
somewhere.
a week. We skipped a week, yeah.
It said 1 year.
1 year anniversary is next week.
Well,
but hey, technically,
the filming date.
we did skip a week.
Let's go.
Yeah, it was more of a VA issue. I think we recorded it. He didn't
100%,
post it, so we're like, let's
100%.
move it to next week.
Well, dude, Facebook memories aren't a bad thing, you know. Instagram memories pops up. Just depends.
Either way, dude, it's been an unbelievable
year. It just
year
depends on what's
to do this,
popping
bro.
up, you know.
Yeah.
But that was a good one when I saw that yesterday. And it just goes to show you, man, what God puts on your heart. If you just stay consistent with it, you can see the value that it's bringing to so many people.
Yeah.
So, always a pleasure doing this with you, man. I think I've definitely grown in the last year. It's gotten me out of my comfort zone. I think watching back the first couple episodes, I was doing like, who the heck is that dude? What is he talking about? Like, this dude doesn't know anything. I think the church actually shrunk during our first couple weeks because they're like, I lost all credibility.
I thought it was good, bro.
But, you know, with anything, with practice and time, man, and having you as I wouldn't say co-pilot, I would definitely say I'm the co-pilot to your leadership on here. So I appreciate you, man.
Well, I appreciate you, dude. I know when we got together and we talked about it, and I said, man, you know, this is kind of my vision, and you had the same vision, which is just like, man, we're not trying to just help people get better in one area. You know, and God wants us to grow in every area, right? And how many know that we fall into seasons of that where you're crushing it maybe financially, but you look and you're at a faith deficit where you're like, man, I just feel like separate from God. I just feel like I'm kind of, you know, anxious and worried. And even though I should be grateful and excited, well, why do I feel that way if my bank account's so full? Well, it's because that's just one part of it, man. You know, and the same thing with family and fitness and all these different things that kind of come together. And so, man, it's been a pleasure to be able to really intentionally, you know, focus on this specific thing each week. It gets me thinking about my areas of my life and saying, hey, on a 1 to 10, how well am I doing, right? And I thought about this the other day. I was looking at my affirmations, and I feel like affirmations just serve as a great reminder of who we're called to be and who we need to be to go out there and reach our goals, right? It's kind of like you look at you know, Scripture, and how many times did God remind the Israelites of how many times He got them out of Egypt?
Yeah.
You know, like it's over and over again. Just say, hey, hello, wake up. Like, I'm good. Yeah. I'm faithful. Like, you don't got to worry. I got your back. Like what I did before. And I think as for us as humans, man, like it's so easy to get off track, to forget. And for me, I'm just so grateful that every week I get to remind myself of really the things that matter most and start to put to the side the things that matter least. Yep. And so this conversation always serves me well. And it was cool to see, you know, last week we had quite a few people come up and just talk about how this has been sown into the life. And that's our desire, is not to be just another podcast you can check off and say, hey, I watched it today. But no, man, I feel better. I think better. I'm going after higher levels because I was a part of it today. And so
yeah, I think it's
we
cool.
love you guys.
I think the podcast is giving language to what many people have been thinking for a long time. Like, how do I get better in my marriage? But or in all these different areas, but it's really, how do I get better at life? And I think we've given language to a lot of people on how to level up in all these different areas. And hopefully it's a place that people can escape to and be poured into. And so, yeah, man, I echo all the same things that you said.
Let's go. We're jumping back into Q.
Let's go.
And it was so good last week that we want to make sure we continue to serve you with the questions. Questions kept coming in. In fact, I'm going to look at my phone, not at the screen, because we have all the questions up here, because we just got a last minute question. And so I'm going to. And
again, should we give a caveat to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
We don't know all the answers.
No, not at all.
We don't know all the answers. We're processing, you know, as these questions are coming in, and so we're going to do our best to just conversate and you know, share our experience and what we've been through, what we know, what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, and hopefully give you some nuggets on how to help you navigate whatever situation you find yourself in. And so we don't pretend to be perfect, but we do know that we're progressing And so, let me throw the first one at you.
Well, yeah, and by the way, to that point though, dude, we also are not speaking about something that we have no clue about, right? You watch some people where they're like, "Let me tell you about how to start a business." It's like, fool, you live in your mom's basement still, right? Like, so we're speaking to things that we've really screwed up and fallen through, but have seen some success. Like even with the church and the growth. I mean, the reality is like it's probably one of the fastest growing churches in California. It's got to be up there. And in business, I don't pretend to speak to it unless I've gone through it, and I feel so. Anyways, we've got something, but at the same time, we're screwing it up as we're going through to the next level. So go ahead and hit me with
Speaking of that, bro. All right, here's the first one for you under like kind of a business leadership type question. What's the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to start or really scale a new business?
Well, I would say I think usually it's twofold as far as where I find myself. So for a lot of part of my life, it was one business I had started, and I had hyper focused on that. I think one thing too is too many people have too many ideas, and they're chasing all of them at the same time, and I think that really kind of puts you in a bad spot. Yeah. I think for me, like my focus was singular, like building the insurance business. I wasn't trying to entertain all these different ideas because I had people throw different things at me. There was things that would pop up and it's like, oh, I could do that. I could try this. I could try that. And it was like, no, I'm going to fully focus and be rooted in this. And so I think for one is don't make the mistake of chasing all these different things. Seek God, find some clarity that, hey, this is what I feel like I'm called to go out there and do. I want to start this business. This business has got my heart. It's got my passion. I can see myself serving people and succeeding here. And then think less and do more. I think too often when you start a business is you overthink stuff. And I think the person that gets to a place where their business is profitable and thriving and successful, they have a lower knowing threshold, meaning they don't need to know as much to do. They're not sitting there saying, well, once I figure that out, they take the conditions off the execution. Because if you got all these conditions on execution, you're never going to execute. And then also they act their way into filling. So for me, I sat there as a 19-year-old, young guy, like trying to be able to go out and succeed in business. I had all these different thoughts, man. Like I need to know more about what I'm talking about. And then I would start to dwell on that. Well, because I'm sitting with these people that are 55, 60, and I'm giving them financial advice. They're going to be thinking like, who's this kid to give me advice? And so then my mind starts going there, and I start believing a lie that I need to know way more until I do something. And the fact is, in the doing is where I understand the knowing, because I would sit there and think, well, if I had this scenario, what would I do? And then I'd go play through it all. And then what I realized is once I took made my first phone call, my first sales call, all the things I thought were going to happen didn't happen. Yeah. So I spent all this time, energy, and effort really placating these scenarios and situations, entertaining these conditions. And once I took that first step of action, all of a sudden, what I thought I knew wasn't true. And I started to unpack a real knowing of it from my actual doing. And so I think you got to just, for the most part, I would say people fall into the quadrant of trying to know more before they do more. They're thinking too much. Or on the other side of it, you get somebody that's doing so much and thinking too little. Yeah. So that's another, failure is like you just go out there and you're like, I'm going to take over the world. You go throw a bunch of money into something. It's like, well, bro, do you have an LLC set up? What's your lead gen? How are you getting your customers? What does that all look like? And so I think it's a balance of two. But I do believe that the biggest mistake is trying to learn before you do.
That's good.
It's a balance, but most people are trying to know too much before they do anything at all.
Really good. I think it's the whole, people have said it this way, it's the whole ready, fire, aim concept, right? And so, that might work in sniping something. You need to have the correct aim before you fire. But typically when it comes to a business, what I hear you saying is like, no, you need to be ready, and then you need to go actually do something and then acquire the skill, and then through the doing, you'll develop the knowing, right? Yeah. And so I could echo the same thing, at least, in my business. Because I remember when I first started the janitorial company, it was like, so my answer to that question would be, you got to replace yourself at some point, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of people are really, really good at starting something, and then what you end up starting is just simply a job for yourself.
That's good.
You know what I mean? And so it never becomes an actual business, because a business is something that could run and sustain without you, right? Not 100% hands off, but like if you're going to start something, you want it to be able to provide for you without 100% of your energy being in it. At least that's most entrepreneurs' dream or goal. And so for me, in the very beginning, I was everything to every customer, right? So I was the guy that sold the job. I was the guy that, did the job. I was the guy that followed up on the job. I was the guy that collected the money. I was the guy that, everything to everyone. And I think you can only do so much for so long. But to your point, is like in the beginning, you got to be singularly focused to scale something and not get distracted by the next shiny object that comes your way. Because in any business, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always going to be something else that appears to be better when you find yourself in the mud. Right. Yeah. So when you're going, like, dude, I just remember like thinking when I started my business and you guys were killing it in insurance, I remember thinking like, dude, that's so much easier. All they're doing is on the phone. They just talk to people. They're going to business meetings. They got suits on. And I'm over here cleaning toilets, like, walking around town, passing out janitorial flyers. And I just remember thinking like that business is so much easier than what I'm in.
Hey, the funny thing though, dude, to that point is, Daryl, hit the switcher. Sorry, I gotta keep him on track. You know what I mean? It's leadership. So I remember when feeling the same way. I remember when I talked to you. We were at a resort or something, and you're like, "Man, I just landed this deal, this contract. It was like it's gonna pay me like $22,000 a month." And I said, "It's like, dude, how easy? All you do is you pay somebody that doesn't complain. They just go to work. They just do their job. I gotta encourage these people. I gotta teach them objection handling, how to think. I gotta help them personally grow and see themselves different. So they can. These people, you just gotta.
I gotta hop on a flight.
Yeah. And I remember sitting there thinking, so it plagues everybody, 100%. Right? And that's to the point. Like it plagues everybody.
100%. Yeah. Like whatever you're doing, there's going to be highs and lows, peaks and valleys. So like and we live in a distraction age, so it's easy to compare your low light to someone else's highlight. But what you're saying is like, man, just stay focused and then build something that could actually provide and sustain. And then when you have a little bit of cushion is when you could venture off into other things. Right? Yeah. So we always compare ourselves to the top of the top, and you see, oh, well, this person's in 20 different businesses and investing this and flipping that and started this. Well, it's like, yeah, but you didn't see the last 20 years of their one singular focus that got them that massive nest egg that now they could gamble, they could play risk. And so we want to take our, $2,000 and be like, oh, let me put 200 here and 200 here. Let me start this and that. And it's like, well, no wonder why nothing is succeeding is because you're spread too thin and you don't have any traction anywhere.
Hey, well, answer this. So that's a starting part. Yeah. But like, let's talk about the scaling. Now, the one thing too, that I remember reading this book, Bran, it was The Purpose-Driven Church. And a guy that had done well in business, had made 8 figures in a year. I was early in the business. I was probably 21 when I read the book. He said, "Hey, read this book, replace church with business, and it's just as applicable." And I remember going through it. It's Rick Warren book and be like, "Man, this is so good." And so really, it's kind of the same scaling future. Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Church, talks about how to really build a church and how to grow a church and an organization. And talk about that, like the scaling part. So somebody starts a business, right? They're moving, things are going well, they're starting to get profitable, right? And then they find themselves kind of like almost in this place where they hate what they've built because now they're just working a job that they worked before, but now it's just a job that they've given themselves. And I love what you said because that's the truth. How do you scale a business? So somebody that's got a business right now, maybe each year's kind of repeating itself, right? There's not been great growth. It's not been scaling. What's the biggest mistake somebody makes that prevents them from scaling the business, and what's the biggest thing they could probably do to scale the business?
Yeah, that's good. I think when you have a business, it's your baby, and so you want to have your hand involved in everything. And I've heard you speak to this many times. Is like, as the leader or the owner, you could probably do most things in the company better than everyone, right? So if it's like handling this objection or doing this training, I could probably do that better than most, or running this sales meeting or running this training or teaching this message. I could probably do that better than most. But if I want to scale it and reach more people, which is ultimately the goal of a church or a business, it is to reach your customer, then you have to release some things, right? And bring people into leadership. You gotta train, you gotta manage. And so, but that's scary. It's real scary, right? Because you're like, I remember when I had my carpet cleaning division, right? It's like, well, I can go out and I can clean, 5 or 6 houses a day. I could bring in $1,500, and that's great for me. I do that 5 days a week. I'm killing it, But if I want 2 vans out there running, it's like, well, now I can't do that. Now I can do 2 a day. So I'm losing money. Now I got to train this dude. I'm paying this guy. And so it seems like a big hit up front. Like, how long is this going to take? What if it doesn't work out? What if I make this investment? So most people just end up not doing that. They don't want to scale. And so they're capped out because you only have so many hours in a day, right? And so there has to be that point of like risk versus reward that you could, and it's scary. It's not easy, and everyone, there's different levels to it, but I think most people have to figure out a way if they want their business to scale, because that's another question you have to answer. Like, do I actually want this to grow? Or am I just passionate about this photography or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then just be happy and do that. But if you want a business that's actually going to grow and reach a broader audience, and at some point you have to take a risk and bring other people into leadership, right? And it's the same with church. It's like, could I preach every single Sunday? Yeah. Could I lead every training? Yeah. Could I run the kids ministry? Yeah. Could I do the marketing? Yeah. Could I do the Instagram? Yeah, of course I could. But eventually I'm not going to be able to get it to the scale which like I know it could be. So I have to bring other people in, and it's not just good for me. It's good for everyone involved, you know? Well,
good point, dude. And the fact is that, like, if you did it every week, then you can't go take that weekend to have with your family and the kids and just invest and be there with them, and then all of a sudden you start to like dislike the fact that I'm just trapped in a prison over here, and it stills the joy that God's got for you there, because it's like, man, every weekend. But, you know, I think that if somebody's on here and you've got a headache, right? You're like, my business is giving me a headache. It's probably because you're smacking your head against the ceiling. Yeah. And I feel like when stuff is scaling, right, you just feel a little bit more at peace and fulfilled. I believe that fulfillment a lot of times is tied to when we're growing and giving, right? If we're growing, developing in all these areas of our life, that's where we feel great. You don't just ever get to a place where you just arrived, where the kids are just perfect, your bank account looks so great, better than ever, your relationship with God has never been better, and you could just rest. There's no neutral. Either you're growing or you're dying, right? And so when we're growing and scaling, because scaling is tied to growth, we're going to feel better, right? And then we're giving, meaning that you got to go out there and you've got to learn, you've got to earn, and then you got to return. The returning is a giving part. So when you're sowing into somebody, to your point, where like they're going to go do a message, like I know in a couple weeks I'm doing the message, and you're right, you could do it better than me every single time, right? But you're building me up, and now I get to go out there and give, and so now I feel great because I'm sowing into others, and so that's the cycle. That's the cycle of fulfillment. But in order to scale, what I realized, Brand, was that you have to have like an arbitrage mindset, okay? And if we look at it like financial terms, if somebody's got a mortgage of 7% and they have credit card debts of 20%, right? And they can go and take a second loan out, or a HELOC, and get a loan for 9%, but they can now reduce the 20%, right? They're going to eliminate a higher debt, right? So now instead of paying $900 a month for that debt, maybe your debt is only going to cost you $400. It's the same amount, but you just repositioned it. And so that's the same way I look at it when it comes to an employee. What's your time worth? And so if you're doing things that you could delegate to somebody else, you're actually getting paid that per hour. And so in your career, in your business, there's certain things that you do that pay significantly higher. If I make a sales call and I help somebody buy the offer that I'm presenting them, that's a high-paying position. If I recruit somebody or I'm helping build a business, scale a business with new people, that's high-paying position because of the revenue that's tied to their productivity. But if I'm now doing the administrative stuff, if I'm now looking at the books, if I'm doing the accounting, if I'm making sure stuff is all organized and orderly at the office, well, what could I pay somebody? Now, if I could pay somebody $20 an hour to do that job, and now I've freed up 5 hours to go out there and do something in my career that makes me $200, I've now just made $180. So it's not a cost, it's a shift, right? I've now shifted my time in a better way. I think the thing that people mess up with scaling that way is they buy their time back, that 5 hours, and they've not gotten to a place of scaling where they could actually buy their true time back. What I mean by that is like you pay somebody 10 hours and you don't do nothing but spend time with your family because you've got enough passive income. They're like, I just don't want to deal with doing my laundry. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to. So I'm going to pay that person to do all that stuff, and I don't have to go replace it with another activity. But in the beginning stages, until you get to a very high level of scale, you've got to replace that 5 hours with the actual activity. So I'll say people get a person that they bring on board to do some staff and administrative stuff. They get 5 hours freed up, but then that 5 hours is not accounted for anywhere in their schedule with doing a higher income producing activity. That 5 hours is spent waking up a little later, going and kind of hanging out a little bit more, just kind of dawdling in the office, their activity from production doesn't go up. So now it is an expense. Yep. But if you took that 5 hours and did some income producing, well, now you've 10x'd your activity. Now you can start working your way out of the business and you've scaled it the right way. But I want to, last thing I'd say to that is it sucks. So when you hit the lid and you got a headache, like the goal is relief. The truth, though, about it, it sucks before it gets better. It sucks worse before it gets better because now you got to slow down and you are better at doing those tasks that you should be delegating because you've already looked at and saying, I have an arbitrage situation I can create here. But now you got to teach them how to do it. So now I've got to slow down. I got to show them how to do it, which means I'm now taking more time is spent doing that than it would have been. So I'm actually going to reduce my time in my schedule and I've got to pay them. But once you get them trained up and you can release it, now you go from here, now your lid raises a little bit more and you can continue to move forward. So, I mean, that's the point I would make, guys, is like, if you got a headache, it takes some time and effort to sit down, pause, and ask yourself, what can I automate? What can I delegate? And what can I eliminate? Those are the 3 ways to help scale. Systems and standards are going to be a big way to use scale. That comes to delegation, automation, and elimination. So. All right, dude, let me get you the one that popped through last minute before we hopped on. We got this one here. What's important for you and your spouse to stay strong while both serving in ministry as leaders with the responsibility of business owner, parenthood, and everything in between? That's a good one, bro. So basically, how do you stay married while you're trying to level up your life?
I think we're all trying to figure that out, right? I think we've talked about this before, is just like staying present in the thing that you're actually doing. I think for me anyways, and this might be different for everyone, but how I've, I guess, designed my life is like it all works together. And so there's not a big separation. Like I'm not like pastor here and then like my kids aren't involved in my ministry. Yeah. Or like my wife's not involved. Everyone's kind of involved in anything. And so that's at least for me how I've designed it on purpose, because it's difficult. Like there's no one answer that I could give that's like, okay, this is how, you maintain a healthy, say the question again, just so I want to be clear.
Yeah, let me pull back up. All right, so it says, what's important for you and your spouse to stay strong while both serving in ministry as leaders with the responsibility of business? So basically, like, how do you strengthen that relationship with your spouse?
Open communication, right? I think sometimes as a man or as a dad, you can hold on to some things that you don't want to either bring the spouse into or the kids into, and there's definitely wisdom to that. Like there's certain weights that I don't want to put on Mariah, like when it comes to like the business, that she doesn't need to know certain things. Like she doesn't need to know the stress of like, oh, I might have this account fall through. Like I don't have to bring her into that, right? And so there's that side to it, but then there's also times where I'm like, no, I need to lean on her for support. Like this sucks right now. And dude, she knows me so well. Like I'll walk in, she'll be like, what's wrong? Like what happened? Who called? Like who's about to cancel? Like who quit? Like what? Like dude, she just knows it. And it's because we've been navigating this entrepreneurial road for 12 years now. Like there wasn't one season of our life where it was just like 9 to 5. We got home and it was like solely family. Like it's always just been like this constant conversation of like our whole entire lives are exposed to each other. That makes sense. And so there's been no on or off switch. And so I think that again, it just, every couple's different. So if you're both working 9 to 5s and you don't have to bring work home, like don't bring it home. Yeah. Like that would be my advice. Like solely, be focused on the family, be focused on each other, grow together. But if you have like a business that you're trying to scale together, like I think open communication is key. Especially if you're doing it together. Yeah. Right. I don't know. That's difficult.
Yeah, dude,
that's a hard question.
As you're talking, I'm thinking like it is difficult. Like for me, my struggle, Brand, is like going really hard in business, going really hard in the career category, or could be going really hard in ministry. And then you get home, and it's kind of like there's like 3. I can't remember where I heard this, but it's like you got like 3 shifts, right? Like the first shift is like career, business, ministry, and then the second shift is like, okay, I got the kids, I got to get them, take care of them, I got to spend some time with them, And then by the time you're done with that, the third shift is like the late shift, right?
Yeah.
It's like maybe you're at 9 o'clock and you're finally in bed with your spouse. And it's like a lot of times it's so easy to check out then and just like either go on your phone or just put on a show. And that because you're exhausted, dude. Like, you know, I mean, sometimes on my second shift, dude, I'm like, man, it's been like a lot I've been navigating through and a lot of hats and all these careers and different businesses I've started. It's like now I got to make sure, all right, I can't now have given all my best in my business and then give the rest to my priority. I'm first called to minister to my family, to be there for my family. And that's a struggle that I've got that I have to almost intentionally, before I get out of my car, is just kind of breathe and say, all right, it's the second shift and there's still a third shift. And I need to make sure I get some strength from God, because like I'm already kind of feeling like I just want to just check out. And I've had that where Tosh's like, hey, like, are you checked out? Like, hello, are you here? And I'm just like kind of staring, because I'm just mentally kind of exhausted from all the stuff I navigated through that day. And it could be a day where you've had more struggles and stuff like that, or more storms, so to speak, whether that's an issue with the client or a customer or staff or whatever it is, right? But I think that's something that I still I have to intentionally think about it, or else I'll mess up the second and the third shift is what we're talking about.
100%. And I also think like I've learned over time is like I don't have to be all things to all people, right? So there's some healthy boundaries that you have to develop with people, like right in general, or even we've talked about like having a day of rest or a day of reset, or just like certain times to do certain things. Because if not, if you have all these different hats that you're wearing, you got mom, dad, you got husband, wife, you got business owner, minister, whatever it is, like you have all these different hats, and at any point for me in my life, like I got to put on one of these hats, and so there's just, and I think I've had to learn this the hard way. Is just like, okay, there's a certain point where I don't have to be pastor. Like if someone calls me at a certain time and it's like, I don't have to say yes to this right now.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm okay saying not right now. I can't do this. I'm dad right now, or I'm husband right now. And so I think just learning yourself, understanding who you are, is key to that, right? There's certain times where like I don't have the energy to deal with this right now. Yeah. Like I'm trying to focus on this sermon or this training or this meeting. Like I can't do that right now. You know what I mean? So I think just over time, learning boundaries, learning yourself, learning like what works for you, because everyone's different. There's no, you ask a business guru, he's gonna be like, no, you need to work 15 hours a day and like come home and like grind for 10 years for your kids. That's going to be the best formula for them. Everyone's different. You know what I mean?
Well, I disagree with that person.
I do too. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But that person would preach that. And like, okay, well that might work for you and your setup, but like,
I don't think it does.
If you want a holistic, approach to a healthy life, then they all have to fit together. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the point of the podcast is like a leveled up.
You could have it all.
You could have it all. 100%.
Yeah. But dude, I think that's so good, man. And it is the struggle to make sure that you're diligent and intentional, because if not, and like as you're saying, dude, I'm thinking like for myself, like I was kind of raised up within business of thinking like I need to make sure that I'm always available for somebody, that I'm like always showing like I'm nonstop, going the extra mile, like I'm there. And a lot of times that robbed me from being present and purposeful in the moment that I had to maximize that was before me. And it goes back to like putting the things that are less priority over the things that are more of a priority, which is like I need to have that time with the family. So if anybody's running a business and you feel like you just have to answer all the time, I think, Brand, I've learned that from you, and watching your ability just to be like, okay, no, I'm here right now, because I was kind of like, I felt good. I got my identity from like always being available, and it's false. It's not going to lead to the higher levels in your life. And so I love that. And I think a date night also is one thing I think of when I read the question, is like you got to schedule some just time with your spouse. Like do like Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. One of those days, sometimes it's Tuesdays, sometimes it's Thursdays. We go on a date night. Sometimes it's just me and Tosh. Sometimes it's a couple, like we're going to get together with you guys tonight and go on a date, and there's no kids. We just get to actually have, grown-up conversations.
Yeah.
And how many know that if you're the spouse that's home with your kids, you need that?
Yeah.
Like our spouses, they start coming up with words and like their own language. It's like, how do you go? What language is that? And it's like, oh, it's toddler language because you hang out with kids all day. Like you need some adult interactions, right? And so,
we're all, we were out together the other day with all the kids, right? We're down in San Diego, and the girls start talking, and they're not even speaking in complete sentences, like legit not complete sentences, and they're cracking up laughing, knowing exactly what the other person's saying, and we're
what world are we living in?
What is happening?
We need to get these girls out and have adult conversations more often. And last thing I'd say to that, and then we'll do the last question, is a good book I read a long time ago that if somebody's not read it, I think it'll really help. Because really what you're asking is like, man, our plates are full.
Yeah.
We've got a lot we're handling. Business, ministry, there's just your plates are full. And so like, how do we make sure with our time we have that we can strengthen that relationship? Because the truth is you don't have 12 hours with your spouse every day. Most don't. And so like the book, The 5 Love Languages, will help you unpack like every person's different. But in the time that you do have, like make sure it's intentionally filling their cup. Because like for Tosh, like it's quality time, and some it's affirmations, some it's gifts, sometimes it's acts of service. Like each person has more of what that looks like. And so when you're spending the time, if you understand the love language, you're going to be more intentional to strengthen the relationship because you're speaking the language that they want to receive. Yeah. All right, let's get the last one up real quick. This one is, this is another deep one. Who's this? What's the name? Tierra? There's a lot of E's.
We're messing this up.
But
it's a screenshot. We can barely see it.
Okay, well, it says, does God make you go? This is a great question, by the way. Even though we can't pronounce your name, don't let that reflect your ability to ask a great question. Does God make you go through the same trials to teach you the same lesson? Bro, that's for you. I'm going to sit back and learn right now.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to sit back and learn right now.
Maybe we'll stop doing these posts on Instagram.
That's a good one.
Does God make you go through the same trials to teach you a lesson? I think
to teach you the same lesson.
To teach you the same lesson. I think,
So you haven't learned the lesson then.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say. So I would say that yes and no, right? So does God put you through trials? Yeah, probably. Right? You see God testing people throughout Scripture. Does He still test us today? Maybe. In the same way, probably not. But I do think, God gives us free will. God gives us choices. But God also gives us a clear way to live, right? He gives us values and principles and examples of how to live. And so I think a lot of the trials that we go through are self-induced. I don't know if God's like, let me place this in their life for this thing to happen so I can prove a point to them. I would say probably not. But God does use, bad situations to bring light to Him, to bring like, hey, you see how you made that bad decision? Hey, you see how that thing came into your life, or you see how this trial, or see how this diagnosis, or see how this thing happened. I could use this as something in your life to point you back to living a righteous life, to point you back to living a holy life, to get you back on track, to get you living the life that I've called you to live. Will He send the same trial again and again and again? Maybe. I don't know the answer to that. Like, all I could say is that God, we know, can work any situation for your good if you allow Him to. But you have to see it that way. It's like we could be a stubborn kid that's like, we all have parents that we're trying to teach our kids a lesson. Mm-hmm. Will you intentionally bring harm on your kids to teach them a lesson? I wouldn't. Like, I would never do that. And I'm made in the image of God. So I would say no, He probably doesn't send bad things your way. But He can use a bad thing that came your way. Like if my kids got a bad grade, then I would teach them a consequence for their, lack of study or their bad grade. My kids might see it as like, Dad's rude, Dad's mean, Dad's punishing me. Well, no, I'm really teaching you and giving you a consequence for your bad behavior, but you were the one that did it. Does that make sense? So what I would say to answer the question, yes and no, maybe and maybe not. Yeah. Right? It just depends on how you look at it. But I do think God's given us a clear direction on how to live our life, and it's up to us to see God in everything, to see the good in it. and to take the lesson and to hopefully not have to repeat it over and over again. Like it's better to live by someone else's experience than your own experience, right? I heard a story the other day, and it was a dad. It was a pastor telling a story, and he said there was a dad and there was a massive blizzard, and he opened the door, and in his yard he had to like get to the other side of the yard to turn off to fix something that was going on during this huge storm, and the snow was like 4 feet already, right? And so he had his little son with him who was like 5 years old, and so the dad starts to walk out to the other side of the yard to fix this problem. And he turned around and his son was following. He's like, son, you can't come. Like, this snow is 4 feet deep. It's taller than you. And he said the son didn't listen, like just kept following him. And he's like, son, you have to go back inside. Like, this is not good for you. And the son basically looked back up to his dad and said, Dad, it's okay. I'm following in your footsteps. Like, it's easy for me to walk because I'm following you. Mm-hmm. You know, he wasn't walking in 4 feet of snow. He was walking in his dad's footsteps. And so I think for us, God wants us to walk in other people's footsteps and not make a ton of mistakes, right? That's why we have the Bible. That's why we have the church. That's why we have spiritual counsel, so we can walk in other people's footsteps, so our life is not as difficult as it could be, right? And so if you're experiencing the same problems or the same trials over and over again, you've probably veered away from wisdom. And you probably walked out of the footsteps that God's placed before you. So if you're going through the same trials, I would say, do some self-reflection and try to get back into alignment with the God's way for your life.
Dude, well, I'll tell you what, that I got nothing to say about that. I'm glad I was able to sit back, kick it, and listen. That was so good. Last week you ended with like an unbelievable story, and then this week you somehow came up with a great story. But I think it's just for everybody, it allows you to visualize, right? Yeah. Like really what that looks like. Because it would suck walking in 4 feet of snow, especially if you're only 3 foot tall.
Right.
And sometimes our life feels that way.
Yeah.
It feels like we're walking in 4 feet of snow. We're 3 feet tall. Like, how are we going to actually survive? Well, it's like, hey, let's open up the Word and get back in His presence, because God's the source for all things that are good.
100%.
All the emotions, the joy, the peace, the rest, all those things that we want to have, they're found in Him. And say, God, what good do you have in this? And because the enemy wants to get us further away because of a self-induced issue, and they are self-induced. I like what you said, bro. Like that a lot of times we try to point, like, was it the enemy? Was it God? A lot of times it's us. Like if you continue to overspend and you're like, why is my account always, dude? You ran the card.
Yeah,
like it was you. Like, why can't I lose weight? Dude, you ate the cupcake. Yeah. Like, what are we talking about? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is something that a storm just comes about.
Yeah, sometimes it's just life. So I don't know the exact situation of, like, the young lady that asked the question. So we don't want to, like... Yeah, but sometimes life's just life.
Yeah.
So keep going. You're good.
No, I mean, and it's like, even with, like, Parker, like, I don't know how that, that the diagnosis came back. I mean, the reality is, like, we live in a fallen world, right? Yep. And so that storm that we navigated through, I mean... There was some stuff that maybe, she was eating, or the environment that she was in, that kind of caused that cancer to come about. And so our job is to sit there and say, okay, how do we navigate this and seek God and get closer to Him and let His glory be shined through this? And when you do that, then typically you're not going to face that same exact trial, because you've taken that lesson, you've applied it, you've gotten closer to God, and now you don't make that same choice because you've experienced it, and you've got a new understanding and perspective of it, because you've already kind of walked through it, right? You've already put your feet in those footsteps, and you kind of know, like, all right, this is how I get to the other path without feeling like I'm going to get buried alive. So I love it, bro. Thank you for that, dude.
Thank you, man.
I think we'll do another Q&A next week. This is good. More for myself, because I like just asking a question, sitting back and be able to listen to your answer, bro. So guys, hey, make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you guys want to make a difference in others' lives. Sometimes it's as simple as a share. We overcomplicate things, man. It's so easy to be like, well, if I got to make an impact, then I got to go, read, a big book, and then journal, and then give them some points. Now, sometimes just a quick share can make an impact in somebody's life. I know that there's been many people that have shared things with me. You just shared a great, kind of course that I've been going through that has impacted me. And that was just a quick share, like, hey, check this out. And so, guys, make sure to share this with somebody that you care about. Share it on your social. Make sure to share this with somebody that you care about. Share it on your social media. Share it on your feed. Let's get this out there. But we love you guys. Make it a big week. Stay strong. Be steadfast. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.